Nice to see you all here. Welcome to our monthly check-in. And we are here with Parampreet Singh. Diana, I don't know, have you met Parampreet Singh from the kids yoga training? Yeah,
Yes, sir.
nice. And then Claire is here. And now Claire is a graduate of Young Yoga Masters training from the very first session, the very first time we offered it. And then Claire and I went on to write the 200-hour teacher training together. And Claire also wrote the teen yoga program and offered it at her studio. She's had two studios. Diana, you're in a studio as well, right?
Yes, but more with the public education system now.
Claire and I were talking about doing a 200-hour teacher training in the fall, and we decided to see what kind of interest was out there in the 200-hour teacher training. So we're doing a little presentation about the 200-hour teacher training, and you're welcome to jump in with any questions. If you don't have your 200-hour teacher training, if you're watching the replay, to become a registered children's yoga teacher, you need both the 200-hour training plus the 95-hour children's yoga training to register with Yoga Alliance. So it's a little push for people to consider it who don't have it. I'd like to welcome you all to our monthly check-in. And today we're doing a combination check-in of the Young Yoga Masters training and mini training and the Lemon Karma monthly yoga workshop that Claire does. So we're mixing two together. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aruna Kathy Humphreys, and I've been a yoga teacher for quite a while, since 1998. And my style of yoga has changed. I was really deep into yoga. I met my husband in a meditation group who's on the call. Parampreet Singh is here. And we both were studying with a guru. We were doing having a guru disciple relationship, bhakti devotional yoga experience. And we both moved on to teaching meditation, teaching yoga, to the children's yoga teacher training. And then I'd also like to introduce you to Claire. And
That's me.
Claire's here.
So my name is Claire. Yes, of course, I met Aruna and Parampreet quite a few years ago. I was in the kids yoga teacher training, and Aruna had this idea to write a 200-hour program. And, I tell this story, you really planted a seed. You said to me, how long have you been teaching yoga? And at that point, it had been 7 years. And you just kind of said off the cuff, well, why aren't you a trainer? And I had never thought about it. I just was quite happy teaching yoga. I had never thought about being a trainer. So we worked together and developed the 200-hour curriculum, got it approved with Yoga Alliance. And that actually moved me from my hobby of teaching yoga in my basement to a handful of students. It gave me the sort of financial stability to move into a commercial storefront studio. And we were teaching yoga, of course, but also the 200-hour program since 2014. Many happy graduates. It's changed a lot. Yoga Alliance changed some of the standards recently, so we've upgraded the training to meet those new standards. And of course, we've changed the program to be able to offer it online and globally and sort of internationally. So that's really exciting. And here we are, basically just trying to see, now that everybody's schedule has changed, what time are you available? What sort of format are you looking for? How much direction do you want directly from your trainer and interaction versus self-paced learning? So our timeline for today is we will talk about what's involved in a deep dive of a 200-hour certification, what to expect from your training. And then we'd like to put you into some breakout rooms so you can discuss any obstacles you have in possibly committing to a training, particularly at this time, timeline, schedules that you have, your preference for format. Do you want self-paced, or do you want live online? Do you want in person? And then we're going to take a quick poll and sort of come back and talk about the answers and get a feel for where everybody's head is these days in terms of getting certified as a 200-hour teacher.
So let's look at this deep dive of a 200-hour yoga teacher certification. And what I wanted to ask people to do is to write in the chat 3 things you know to be true about yoga. From that, what I'm thinking of, like how it makes you feel, what are the benefits you've experienced, just in your own life. What are 3 things you know to be true about yoga? If you want to write it in the chat, or if you want to just unmute, you could also unmute yourself and just say 1 or 2 or 3 things, whatever you want. I'm going to invite Claire and Parampreet to do the same if they want to. And I'm going to try to think of 1 thing or 2 things myself.
Well, I can start. We've got like a low pressure system happening here, so I'm sort of on the verge of a headache earlier today. But got my shoulder movements in, got a couple of twists in, got a forward fold in. I feel like yoga gives me the resources to cope with daily life. So I'm thankful for that.
That's nice. Okay. Hi, Olena. Okay. Maggie's eating lunch and she's on her lunch break at work, so she has to go. I that totally understand, Maggie. It's nice to see you here and feel you here, if not see you here. Olena, did you want to jump in with anything?
Sure. So the question was how yoga, I missed it. I was
Oh, okay, that's okay. What are 3 things or 1 thing you know to be true about yoga? Just your own experience of yoga, the truth of yoga in your own life.
Oh man. That's a vast question. Um this last couple years, if I didn't have the training and the yoga if I didn't have yoga in my life, meditation, all of that sort of stuff, I'm not sure what state I would be in at the moment, just with my health journey that I've been on and the whole 9 yards. Like it absolutely has been a lifesaver for real. So it kind of just runs in the blood now. Like it's just, I don't even like naming it anymore. It's just lifestyle basically. Because there's so many labels with the word yoga. Like there's so many thoughts that go with our words of how English is perceived by each person. So it's a good thing. And I love you guys. I'm so happy to see you all.
Thank you. That's nice.
Aruna, I'd like to share.
Sure.
So every day is a constant struggle. When you wake up, you don't know what's gonna, come your way. And for me, like the anxiety, stress, is gonna come at me at all times. And for me, yoga doesn't make it go away forever, but in that moment, in the practice, for that time, it will definitely release the anxiety and the stress, make the worries go away just for a moment, and then just make you feel good and clear your mind and release all of the tension or stress that is built up in the body for that moment. So instead of taking a pill or drinking alcohol, I tell my students, adults, well, I guess I could tell teenagers too, but I just, after they're done with Shavasana, I say, see, we have it all within us to do this for ourselves without opening a bottle, of liquor or taking a pill or anything. That we have it within ourselves to give this peace and calmness to ourselves. So, and I make a joke too to other people, like friends. I'm like, without yoga, I'd probably be in jail. I'd probably be in prison. It doesn't mean that I still don't, lose my I don't have, patience, and people cut me off, and, all these things come at you. You have reactions naturally as a human. I'm not like enlightened where nothing is going to affect me yet. But yeah, again, the coping skills, like, like she had just said, that, that's what yoga brings.
Mm-hmm. No, beautiful. Thank you both. That was really well said. Parampreet, do you want to add something?
Sure. Actually, I'll continue with that with the prison theme. Um, because I mean, like, for me, my practice is more meditation and philosophy, and my asana practice or my physical body practice is there, but a lot of the time I spend on the meditation and philosophy. And I think like the foundational idea of yoga that speaks to me is that like we are in a prison, like we are in a prison of the body, the mind, and the heart in this particular like flesh being with thoughts and feelings that we are. And yoga is for me a way of one, seeing that, and then also seeing what I can do sort of like to break out of those boundaries in moments and to recognize that, okay, this is me in this biological form with these thoughts, with these feelings that have developed from everything that I've experienced in life. But also there's a part of me that can reflect on that. There's a part of me that can ask questions, and there's part of me that can have actions to change some of those realities, you know, like Claire was saying, you know, if she wakes up with a headache for some reason, she can do asana yoga, and that can relieve some of that. If, you know, if I'm feeling anxious, I can do meditation, I can change some of that. And for the philosophy too, is just changing your perspective on how things are and what they might mean, because how things are isn't always what they might mean. And in order to push through that, you really do need to have a deep, reflective, meditational, philosophical practice supported by the asana. So yeah, I guess those are three things that are true about yoga, that I'm a body, I'm a mind, I'm a heart, and I can work with that.
Lovely. Thank you. Yeah, those are all, I think I would agree with everything in my own experience of yoga too. I think it's the first thing I remember what got me hooked on yoga was that it helped me fall asleep. At night, I was having trouble sleeping, and it gave me options to help me control my mind and think of things I wanted to think about instead of thinking of things I didn't want to think about. So that was all part of the practice. And I like this question a lot. I use this question at retreats because I find, like, as a teacher, we don't have, I know everyone here is a teacher actually, so I'm going to speak to you as teachers. We don't have to tell people the benefits of yoga. Like, if you open it up to your students and ask them, you tell me the benefits of yoga. Like, it's so great to hear all those answers. I just find it so inspiring. So I remember doing this at a retreat with like 38 people we had at this retreat. It was a pretty big one. And we started with this, you know, name one thing about yoga, why you wanted to do yoga. And just like after hearing 38 answers, everyone was just like, okay, I'm here for the right reason. It's like, I need to do more of these health affirming things. So that's one thing I wanted to look at, is like why people take this deep dive into 200-hour training, is just to learn more about something that's so powerful.
If I could add on there, as a trainer, you're right. A lot of people do participate in yoga teacher training for that deep dive. They're sort of curious. They hear about this mystical practice of yoga that changes lives, keeps people on the right track. And they never really actually intend on teaching. I would say, I don't know if I would put a percentage on it, but quite a few people enter teacher training for their own personal experience and for coping strategies within their own life. And a lot of them are terrified when we first start saying, oh, practice teach a partner or practice teach in a group. No, I'm just here for me. However, generally by the end of the 200 hours, people are just so bubbly with this inspiration and this information that has helped them. They almost can't help but share it. So it's not to say everybody goes on to be a formal yoga teacher, but I've seen people, you know, they're the ones that put up the sticky notes in their office, like breathe, love yourself, or, you know, one way or another, they're sharing the philosophies and the concepts. And I just wanted to kind of share that it's very much is a certification and a professional designation, but it's a journey. And a lot of people do say it's life-changing, it's transformative. I know, Aruna, you and I are very careful to say those words in our like marketing because we don't want to overpromise. However, every time you ask somebody, they say it themselves. So it's really great. So people take teacher training who want to be yoga teachers. And of course, as I just said, lots of people take it who are not necessarily interested. I have recently been seeing more people enrolling for training who have this idea of, teaching on every continent, or they want to have this lifestyle where they're not tied down to an office job. They can teach at resorts and things like that. So that's kind of cool. That's typically younger people without families or kids in schools, though that's not always the case. People are getting a lot more liberal with how they're living their life. So there's lots of reasons. And then also I just find, in my experience leading a training, I find we always get the right group of people at the right time. People make really, really strong friendships and connections. You're exploring these deep philosophical concepts with people who don't dismiss it, with people who want a deeper understanding, with people who are curious about themselves. There's generally a layer of vulnerability, where things went astray for people in their life and how they're kind of bringing it back or forgiving themselves or understanding themselves a bit more with the philosophy particularly. My partner, Craig, he always laughs at me sometimes. He's like, I go to your yoga classes when we had our studio before we kind of closed for COVID, but he's like, gosh, everybody leaves crying. I know, we didn't say anything, but the movement and the theme just sort of touches something in you, and it's a release, and it's really nice. So you're right, everybody has their reason for participating in yoga, but for taking that next step into yoga teacher training, definitely for your own personal journey, definitely for connection. And those who are looking for some sort of accountability or structure to their practice so that they can learn to coordinate and sequence their own practices for themselves. Like I have my go-to poses, as I said, for when I have a headache. I know which poses influence which systems of the body and which ones are going to help. I'm not just pulling poses from thin air. So we learn to structure, and people wanting that regular practice typically. Of course, there's lots of reasons, but those are a few.
So let's just look at the key elements that you're going to learn in a 200-hour teacher training. And I would say a 200-hour training, a lot of people call it a foundational training now. And probably you're going to learn, and what we have in our 200-hour training is you're going to learn about the 8 limbs of yoga. So as Parampreet was talking about, that asana is just one of the limbs of yoga. And you're going to study the other limbs that aren't typically studied in a yoga class. And you're going to learn the philosophy of yoga and more about the history of yoga and the origins of the yoga teachings. So one example is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And the way we have our 200-hour training structured, it's kind of nice. We have 4 50-hour modules, and in each 50 hours we cover 2 of the limbs. So we get to do a deep dive into the yamas and the niyamas over the 50 hours, and then we move on to limb 3 and 4. So we get to deep dive into those, which is nice. Here's the first module.
It's so funny. Every time I offer the training, we'll start a module. I'm like, ooh, I think this is my favorite module. But I say that every time because they all are a little bit different. They all have sort of different focuses, though we do have all the educational categories. We've got movement, we've got philosophy, and we've got asana and techniques training in every module. But the first module, which is 50 hours, is called the Enlightened Life, because we're looking at what the yogis refer to as limb 1 and 2 of this whole 8 limb path or system. And limb 1 and 2 are the yamas and niyamas, and really they're just interesting because I find a simple yet very complex way of being and your behaviors, sort of your do's and don'ts for being a good person, first and foremost, before you even get into the yoga asana component. So we learn all, we do this deep dive into an introduction to the philosophical concepts that set us up for success along the path. We also get right into practice teaching at the very beginning. We talk about the sun salutations, and not just how to do the sun salutations and the techniques, but also the philosophy behind it. So we're constantly referring back to the purpose behind our movements. By the end of the first module, we're actually already designing a lesson plan for your own home practice. So we've done a deep dive into ourselves and what we need from the practice. We've looked at sequencing, we've looked at how to create a lesson plan, and students are able to teach a lesson plan by the end of the first module, which is really exciting. A lot of our students graduate with confidence, knowing that they get that much just in the first module. So it's fun.
I was just listening to a podcast about yoga training, and they were talking about how people need more practice teaching in their teacher training. And then I was thinking about our teacher training, how the very first day people are practice teaching.
They go deer in a headlight. They don't like it, but they benefit from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we look at the anatomy of a healthy life. This one mostly covers the core competencies in the anatomy and physiology category of the Yoga Alliance curriculum. And we're looking at asana and pranayama. We have a philosophy in our training, which is a use the thing to teach the thing philosophy. So we use lesson plans and explore already created lesson plans for students to be able to teach those lesson plans, but also to be able to create the lesson plans. And that's a big positive way that people learn how to sequence, is by just seeing tons of lesson plans. So we have 7 more lesson plans in this module, and we're looking at how it's structured. We're going over more anatomy, joints, muscles, skeletal system. And then we're also introducing pranayama and meditation, so that people are not only practicing, but also starting to teach 5 different pranayama. And then they're going to create another lesson plan in this module of the training as well.
And then this, of course, brings us into our third module. We've got finding calm in an age of speed, which I think a lot of people would like to find. Our required reading, we have one for each module. This one is called Living Your Yoga by Dude Lassiter. It's an absolutely beautiful text. We're studying, of course, the 5th and 6th limbs of yoga, starting to withdraw from the chaos of life, which does not mean that we don't notice. We just start to learn that we don't necessarily have to react all the time. And I know it was mentioned earlier that yoga helps us to manage our reactions. We still have a human body and a human life to experience. We're still going to have human reactions, but it definitely helps us to absorb our responses and take our time with processing them. It's a very basic overview of that 5th limb. Of course, we spend many hours. And then once we sort of withdraw from the outside world and we start to focus inwards, then we can start to develop this one-pointed focus or concentration and put our efforts and energy into what is really important and what is really serving for us. This is also a really lovely module because we get to explore gentle and restorative yoga, which I have come to love and require lately in my daily life. And we also look at chakras, which a lot of students find very fascinating. Again, we are practice teaching along the way as we're learning, and we get into chanting. And now students at this point, by the completion of the 3rd module, can not only sequence and teach asana lesson plans, we can incorporate meditations and chanting and gentle and restorative yoga into their lesson plans. So
Mhm.
lots of loveliness to come in that module for sure.
And then the final module, we're moving into limbs 7 and 8. And fortunately, we have Parampreet here with us, who helps us with Sanskrit pronunciation. So this aspirated H is pronounced how, Parampreet?
The which one? Sorry.
This one in limb 7, that
Oh,
Diana.
I see. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Dhyana and
Diana.
Samadhi.
Sorry, say it again.
Dhyana and Samadhi.
Diana and Shamadi. And you never, for me anyways, I need to hear them over and over again pronounced in the Sanskrit. So Parampreet, you've helped us with the Bhagavad Gita, which we explore as part of the roots of yoga. And we also look at the timeline of yoga. And I don't know, do you want to add a little bit about what that study can bring to a person's understanding of yoga?
For sure. And I mean, we definitely here in modern yoga, we know a lot about the asanas, and we sort of know about some of the philosophy. You know, we know that there's a word called karma. We know that there's a symbol called Om, but sometimes a lot of people don't know how all of that fits into Indian philosophy as a whole, because Indian philosophy goes back, you know, thousands upon thousands of years. And Patanjali is a culmination of some of that philosophy, and the Bhagavad Gita is also a culmination of some of that philosophy. But they have roots and things that happened prior that they're responding to. So yes, you can read Patanjali and gain a lot from it. You can read the Bhagavad Gita and gain a lot from it. And if you're also able to understand how they fit, how they're subsequent to everything else that came before, it just deepens your appreciation for what is being said in it, but also why it's being said. And, you know, just with anything we study, the deeper we get into it, the more we can appreciate it. And the beautiful thing about like yoga in every way is, regardless of what level you do it at, it's going to have benefits. So just, you know, reading the sutras is going to have benefits, but the more deeply you can go into it, just like the more deeply you can go into a pose, you more and more become that. As Olena said earlier in this discussion, is that it just becomes who you are and a way of life. And I think it's really important to know the previous philosophy and the historical timeline of where we are once we start with the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita.
And that's what we do in this past, present, and future of yoga. So we have this beautiful foundation. And Parampreet, you'll be helping us teach that module and part of the meditation classes as well throughout the training. And and then we also just touch on specialties, children, seniors, prenatal, teaching online now. That's kind of new since 2019. And the business of yoga. I guess the biggest question people have is, what do I charge? And just looking at admin and forms and insurance and the basics to get you started in your yoga business, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. So all in all, that translates to a 700 plus page manual that is quite beautiful. So that's what you would get as a student in the 200-hour training program. It's actually digital, so you would have it for future reference and, you know, to keep forever. Within that manual, 27 ready to teach lesson plans. As Aruna mentioned, this use the thing to teach the thing. We have asked students to look at the lesson plans, analyze them, sort of deconstruct how they're put together, look at the theme, and then we can use that to then create their own. There's 22 meditation and pranayama practices all together that you'll be competent in practicing and of course teaching. And then we've got pose techniques training and practice and worksheets. So 79 poses all together that you're studying and you're practicing. And you're going to learn, of course, how to sequence to create your own lesson plans. And relatively new in the last couple of years, there's also 40 hours of pre-recorded training with myself, Aruna, and Parampreet. And this portion of the training essentially becomes some self-study. You can do it on your own pace, depending on sort of what the training entails, what the timelines of the training are. There's techniques training in there, there's philosophy in there, there's opportunities for reflection in there. And essentially it's 40 hours because each of the 4 modules contains 10 hours of self-paced, pre-recorded training for your review. This was something new that Yoga Alliance introduced in 2020. And then you get 40 hours of in-person training still with your trainer, which would be one of us or all of us. And at the end, you get a 200-hour certificate. Yeah.
Yeah, the 200-hour certificate is nice.
You can get an idea of what the pose worksheets look like, some of the things that we include. We try to have an experiential training. We find that people learn best from having experiences and connections and storytelling and their own worksheets and their own sort of awareness and analysis of things. So we have the experience and we reflect on that.
The basics are covered in the manual, but then there's a lot of insights for the trainers to pass on their experiences to their students. There's lots of worksheets in it. One thing I'm really thrilled about is our reviews on Yoga Alliance, which is basically thanks to Claire, because I have not yet taught the training, but Claire, you've managed to have all 5-star reviews of this 200-hour training, which is pretty incredible. And I think that's a testament to how much this training is experiential and not only to your teaching, obviously.
I understand, of course. There is a yoga component.
But how good the yoga is. Like, it's just like, it really lets people just really connect to the yoga and deepen their personal practice. And of course, the community that forms is very powerful, and it's a nice way to support you with your teaching journey. There's support during the training, there's live classes, and then after the training, there's ongoing support with our monthly check-ins like this one. We wanted to talk about why people have trouble completing a training.
This one is interesting to me because typically, sort of prior to online training, we would offer a training. The dates and times and expectations for attendance would be very clearly established and laid out, and people would attend and they would participate, and we would keep everybody on track, and they would complete their assignments because they had to, because they were teaching the next day or contributing, and everybody would graduate on time. And then we moved to online with the pandemic, and at the very beginning, I kept that pace. We did have that pre-recorded 40 hours that people had to do throughout the time that we were together, and we were still meeting, even though it was virtually. We were meeting at expected and set dates and times, and we were contributing, and we were working our way through the material, and people were completing the assignments and graduating on time. Except for my very last training that I offered, I gave a lot more freedom. Life seemed to be getting a lot more stressful. People's schedules became a lot more unpredictable. So I allowed for, we still had our online training being offered live and in person like this with Zoom, but I was a lot more flexible if people couldn't make it and they wanted to watch the recording and they wanted to submit a assignment without a deadline. And what I found was people just weren't graduating, right? That accountability to show up at a set date and time and contribute to the training and complete an assignment or the exam. people really required those set deadlines. When you give a deadline of just complete it within a year and submit it to me, it got pushed to the back burner and they were less likely to go back and revisit it. So at the moment, there's still people that have not actually graduated. This is a concern for me because we want people to graduate. This is a big investment. It has these transformative qualities that are being lost. And you're losing that community dynamic if you choose, or your schedule sort of really only allows you to participate by watching the recordings. It's not to say that it can't be done, and some people are very disciplined and it can be done, but we have noticed that there's less people are graduating when there's not hard deadlines, and teacher support and reciprocity throughout the process.
Yeah. I found the same thing with I haven't taught this, but I've been teaching the kids yoga training. And that's not to say, like, I just had someone who signed up, did the full self-paced program in 2 months and just graduated in 2 months, just working on her own. So some people, that is great, but I have made a deal with myself that I am not signing up for any more courses until I complete the ones I've signed up for that I have never gotten around to watching. So I know my personality is that I work better if I'm talking with people. And so when I've signed up for courses where there is a live component on Zoom and we all had to show up, and that worked really well for me. I worked that. So I think a big part of the training is knowing. So not just, I'm going to say to people, like, don't just say what you think you'd like to be like. Look back on your past and think of, okay, in the past, what behavior has worked for me in the past? Like, so if I were to look back and say, okay, every time I've signed up for a self-paced program that I can do at my own pace, the only time I've completed it is when I was about to lose access to the training. And then I kind of hunkered down and was like, okay, I'm not going to have access. I only had access for 6 months. So then I completed it. But if it's kind of lifetime access, you do it whenever you want, it kind of just always stays on the back burner. So I think knowing your learning style and choosing the format that works for your learning style is very important.
Yeah,
and I think
it's hard to know what everybody's schedule is like. We used to offer teacher training on Saturdays, and most people could make that work, but gosh, it just seems everybody's schedule has changed so drastically. We don't really know when people are available anymore. So
even the pace and the frequency, like we used to do the training as a weekend intensive, where everyone would show up for one weekend and we'd just get 16 hours done in a weekend. But when we were doing that online, it seemed harder. Like we had to shorten the hours because people can't be on video for that long. It's just takes a lot more focus. And then plus you have kids at home. So if people have kids at home and they're there, you can't just say, you're like, oh no, daddy or mommy or whoever is, no, just pretend I'm not here. Like the kids know. So it became a lot more challenging that way. So I think to be successful in a training, you really have to look at all these factors and for you, what is going to work for you. So that leads us to our question is like, what schedule, pace, and format would allow you to successfully participate in a 200-hour training? And Olena, I'm curious if you'd like to share what you know about yourself.
I was feeling like I was looking into a mirror when you were speaking. I have one training sitting that is just a couple more hours left, and I just haven't watched the last couple hours.
And there's no deadline? Like
No
it's like
deadline.
access? Yeah.
No, but I do the morning sadhanas that's on the live Zoom with them every morning, but I haven't finished the course part.
You like the live part too.
I do live Zoom because of where I live is actually it's been such a blessing. That is one blessing that has come out of this whole situation the last couple years is the live Zoom. And I would love to take this 200-hour training. However, I'm stuck. I won't say stuck, but I'm at home. And so if it's on live, like if it's on Zoom, I have nothing but time here right now.
I think of you, if I may share, I don't think you'll mind me
Absolutely.
saying, you flew to Ontario from British Columbia to take our 95-hour kids yoga
Yes.
training and paid for accommodations.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was an expense that is now just kind of gets wiped off the board by live Zoom. Like
Exactly.
what a bonus.
Exactly. The amount I've spent in flights and accommodations is quite high with the different trainings that I've taken. So this Zoom has been a godsend for courses and courses that were never available online. And now I have, like, I retook one of my meditation courses, and it only was ever offered in person. Because of all of this situation, it was offered online. And now I have it in my archives forever so I can go back. That I love that. And same with the teachables with the young yoga masters. And it's amazing the amount that we relearn the next time.
Yeah. So tell me about what kind of pace you like. Do you like weekend intensive? Would you rather do one Tuesday night for the whole year or
I like them every day until it's done.
ah.
Cool.
I like the deep dives.
Let's for fun. I'm just going to launch the poll and everyone choose what your preference would be. Let's see if I can launch it. Okay, is a poll showing up in front of you? Okay. Are you able to answer? Okay. Okay. Let me see what happens. This is our first time using the poll. So I'm going to share the results. 1 September to October, so that's pretty close. All 200 hours in 1 month. 200 hours over 4 to 6 months. Weekday during the day, weekday during the evening. Combination. Okay, so this is what we thought might happen. Live online. Okay, there's a resounding call out for live online. I was wondering whether the live in person and Zoom combination would be. And then accountability to complete I work well with schedules and deadlines. We all said that. And do you want us to follow up? Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you for answering that poll. That is fun to see. Olena, do you have any questions about taking it again or how you could use it?
I honestly, I, the biggest thing was Parampreet teaching the meditation and philosophy. that that drew me a lot. And plus, I would really enjoy a refresher from the foundations. I really appreciate when I go back to the foundation. It's amazing the little things that I've missed along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so by going to what they say the basics, it's really not. It's a deeper learning. And that's what I've been finding with the courses and stuff, that taking them online and anytime, it's a deeper dive. Even if it's supposed to be the beginning stages of the teaching, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I really would like to reconnect with that foundation again. Plus, it's nice to be the student.
Hmm.
It's really nice to be the student. No pressure.
It's so true.
I was curious. We've run people through the program and they've had this experience since 2014. And I was also curious how many people would like a refresher, because we forget our yoga sometimes. I know I do, right? Life gets in the way and life happens and we forget our yoga. And I'm like, wait a minute, I have skills, I have resources for this, to call upon them. And I was curious how many people would be interested in a refresher.
We appreciate you being in the hot seat.
I appreciate all three of you. It's so nice to see you.
Yeah, that would be really fun. I mean, just being on these live Zooms every month makes me just enjoy teaching all over again and remember how nice it is to connect with people and have a community. And you've kind of inspired me to think of like, how could we do the training where we meet every day to do a meditation or yoga
Oh, it's so
or something like
lovely.
that?
It's
Yeah,
so
actually, I was also thinking that after Olena said that, is that I think it is kind of important to have, let's say, like a evening, but then
Mhm.
there's also something happening every weekday, possibly. Not long, not necessarily long, but anywhere from, 20 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on whatever works for people. But that continual connection where, like each day could be just a concept, one of the concepts for that week. And I think you're right, Olena. I mean, I think uh, there's lots of people that have daily responsibilities. So 8 hours a day can
Mhm.
be a lot if you have daily responsibilities. But certainly, I mean, that's what the word you use, sadhana or practice, is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a daily remembrance of what you're doing. And as we said, when we do that, things go in us more deeply. We embody them more.
It keeps me accountable to my own practice. It's not about teaching others and
Mhm.
that part. It's more. It's been quite interesting, this journey these last couple years, and I totally agree with you, Parampreet, about the yoga and the asana. It's almost like it's kind of drifting off unless my body physically is agitated and needs it.
Mhm.
It's more the internal. Which of course we need movement every day. So there's like you said, Claire, the forward bends that I couldn't live without those, literally.
You're right. It's not about the asana always. They're a part of it. They're a part I need as well for, physically, but that's really not. It's one part.
Mhm.
But people don't know, right? People think yoga is asana.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So learning more about what it really is.
We're going to really ponder all the feedback we got and we're going to think about what we want to do for this 200-hour training, and we'll keep you posted and hopefully other people will join along. So thank you for coming.
Yeah.